Assalamu alaikum. You're listening to the New Beginnings podcast. No fluff, no holding back, just honest conversations about your journey as a new Muslim.
Brought to you by New Beginnings, a platform that aims to support new Muslims on their journey through Islam, from the Shahada and beyond.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to the New Beginnings podcast. I'm your co-host, Amanda, and today we're going to be discussing convert identities, looking at the issues of identity crises and imposter syndrome, amongst others.
I'm Bilal, your co-host, and joining us are Persephone from Huddersfield and Exauce from Wales.
Assalamu alaikum both.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, honestly.
No, thank you for coming on and for giving us your time. So before we get into the main topic, could you each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your journeys to Islam, if you don't mind? Persephone, would you like to go first?
As an introduction to myself, I would say that I consider myself a mixed race Muslim from the north of England, a majority Black heritage. My dad is British Jamaican, although he doesn't identify as Jamaican, he'll just say he's British, but he's of Jamaican descent. And my mum is Pakistani and Maltese, but nationality wise, she's British as well. In terms of work, I work in the media industry. I am a producer, which has caused some controversial issues, especially bearing in mind my Muslim identity. Coming to Islam was I converted around 10 years ago now. And I think for me, the main thing that brought me to Islam was the discipline of the religion regarding prayer, the 5 prayers a day. That really brought me discipline in my life and grounding in my life at a time where I was quite depressed and anxious. So alhamdulillah, thanks and praise to Allah, here I am now, 10 years later.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us. Exauce, could you share with us your journey to Islam?
Yeah, no worries. So I'll try and top that, but I'll try my best. My name is Exauce. I was born in Africa, specifically in Congo, DRC Congo, and I've been a Muslim now for about coming up to 5 years. So I took my Shahada when I was August 2018. So yes, coming up to 5 years now. And basically, my background was I was a Christian. And so there's different sects of Christianity, obviously, but African Christian is like, you kind of make it up as you go along. So coming from Africa to the UK, I used to love RV lessons in high school. I used to love talking about Christianity, talking about God. And I remember I was sat in one lesson and we started talking about the Trinity. And coming from Africa, I had no idea what the Trinity was. And I was thinking, wait, I claim to be a Christian. I claim to be that I love God, but I don't know the most basic and fundamental part of Christianity. So I went off and done a bit of researching and I was like, whoa, I don't think I could believe in this because it's a bit confusing. But my knowledge of Islam was literally zero. My knowledge was listening from BBC, hearing other people. In my school, there's probably about 4 Muslims and I barely interacted with them. So I had zero to nothing knowledge about Islam. It got to the point where if I was walking down the street because of what the media said, I would literally walk the other side because I was so scared. And I always thought Islam was like such a religion just for the Arabs, literally just for the Arabs, for themselves. They got their own beliefs, their own prophets, literally nothing to do with the rest of the world. And then luckily I was able to meet a few friends in college and we used to have these little debates, Christianity versus Islam. Luckily they were knowledgeable on both subjects and they used to send me back home, scratching my head, thinking, what am I actually a Christian? So when I started watching videos, reading about Islam, and when I first found out that they got the same prophets as in the Bible, such as Moses, such as Jesus, such as Solomon. It kind of opened my mind like, whoa, I thought this was literally an isolated religion only for the Arabs, but they got the same prophets as Christianity. And when I started thinking, okay, what else have I got wrong? And I started looking into who God is, Allah. And I started reading and I'm like, whoa, this literally is what I believe Christianity is. And then luckily enough, I was able to go down to the mosque and take my Shahada and start my life again since.
MashaAllah. And it's funny because I've actually known Exauce for a while now, but I've never actually sat and listened to his story. So that's really, Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us.
Is it all?
So now, mashallah, you're both quite experienced converts, 5 years, 10 years, so I'm sure you'll have some great reflection on today's topic. So let's get started with it, shall we?
So interesting what you mentioned about thinking that Islam is just for the Arabs. So what I want to ask you first of all is, what does the term identity mean to each of us?
That's a really good question. I think identity to me is not only made up of how you physically present yourself, but it's also about your personality, whether you're extroverted, introverted, how you consider yourself as a person in everyday life. So are you kind? What are your characteristics? Are you generous? Do you like charity? And also going into your interests as well. Like, are you somebody who enjoys fitness? Are you somebody who enjoys music, arts? Like, what is your kind of realm? What is your remit? Where do you like to kind of put yourself in everyday life? And for me, that's identity. It's a kind of culmination of several different things, from how you physically present yourself to how you internally relate to other people as well. That's how I would identify. And also as well, I think ethnicity plays a massive part in it. And that's something that I've been learning more about myself as well as time has gone on, especially being Muslim.
Exauce, how would you answer the question?
I literally would agree with what Persephone said, because I literally can't add on to that. But what I'd say as well is identity is what a person is, or what a person is made up of, I would say, in a short term, basically. But it also includes everything that was said as well.
No, I was just going to say it's crazy because whenever somebody asks me, how do I identify? The first thing that comes to my mind is, who am I? What can I tell people about myself? And that's the route for me. It starts from there and then it builds onwards.
What are your thoughts, Amanda?
I've got a little bit of a different take on this, if I'm honest. I view identity, we have our identity, which is what we believe that we are. And yes, there's a whole lot of debate about this right now in society, in British society, which I understand, and I don't want to go there. But I also think that identity in large part is how society views us. So the labels that others apply to us. And I think that part of the problem when people are sort of confused about their identity is because they're placing more importance on the external identification than on the internal identification. So we have, like Persephone said, we have our personality, we have our ethnicity, we have our religion, we have all of these different factors, but those are by and large things that society applies to us as opposed to what we apply to ourselves. Whereas what we should apply to ourselves is, if we're Muslims at any rate, is how do we live our lives? Who do we live our lives for? For what purpose are we living our lives? And that should be the basis of our identity, in my opinion. But yeah, I think it can be a really, really difficult thing. But I think it's a very multifaceted thing, and I think that it's something that, well, we know a lot of converts struggle with it. So, and this is why we've picked this topic, because repeatedly throughout when we've been doing these podcasts and also having conversations with people, we hear this a lot. I'm suffering from an identity crisis. I'm suffering from imposter syndrome. Who am I? Who am I now that I'm Muslim? Letting everybody know that they're not alone in this struggle is really, really important to us, I think. Let's move on to some other questions. So we know that where we're each coming from. My next question is, how do we each identify? So we've talked about what identity is, but what is our identity?
I'll just keep it nice and simple. I'll just say I'm a male African Muslim, to be fair. Like, I don't delve too much into it. I just, what you see from the outside. And then if you want to look at like personality and stuff, I'd say I'm quite like confident person. I like to keep myself fit, go to the gym, but I just stay to like the basics, male African Muslim.
I think I'm on the same page there. If anybody was to ask me, I would be quite proud to just say I'm a mixed race British Muslim, and I'd leave it at that. I mean, you can get buried under so many different ways of identifying, can't you? And I think for myself, and I know other vets, they've felt like their identity has changed depending on where they're at with their faith as well, their level of faith, and how much they've learned about themselves. And also age can determine how you'd identify. Like when I was younger, pre-Muslim, I definitely wouldn't have put myself forward as British, for example, even though I've been raised and born in Britain. But now I'm like, yeah, I'm British. That's part of me,
Okay, that's interesting. We will come back to that. X, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I agree with the kind of society we live in where people expect you to add more information. You know, instead of staying to the basics, they want you to add more. Okay, yeah, okay, you're male, British. What else? What else? What else? What else? And then it gets to a point where you either confuse yourself and like, oh, I don't know what else you want to ask. Do you know what I mean?
Interesting. Bilal, how about you?
Yeah, just agree with everyone else. So obviously, there's probably no end to the type of qualities you can identify yourself with. You know, you've got the Myers-Briggs type indicator personality test, which has become very popular as well. So somebody might say, "Oh, I'm an ENFJ," or and so on. So there's no end to it really. Yeah, but black, Muslim, male. Just keep it simple, I think.
Which one comes first for all of you? The reason I'm asking this is because when I was doing my studies, I've got a qualification in sociology, and we were often talking about identity. And one of the concepts that we had was that you will have an identity that is basically who you are, and everything else is a descriptor, is an adjective. So whatever you are is usually the most important one to you, is sort of the core. And then everything else is an additional descriptor of that. So like for me personally, the most important one, I hope, is Muslim. And then everything else on top of that, female, white, British/Canadian, et cetera, is a descriptor.
100% agree.
So, but which one? So for all of us, I think which one we consider is most important is really, it can be indicative of our life experiences as well, and how solid our identity can be as well. So I'd like to hear. So which ones for you guys would you say are the most important?
I'd agree with you by saying, sorry for saying, I'd agree by saying Muslim is number one, because everything else you can kind of see. Like, I don't need to tell you that I'm black because you can kind of see that. Do you know what I mean? But as a Muslim, if I'm not wearing a thobe, you can't really tell. So I'd rather put that first, and obviously we're pleasing Allah firstly before anything else. So I'd say Muslim defo.
Okay, interesting.
When you put it like that, I don't think I would say Muslim first. I think I would say human first. Like, okay. I'm a human. I know that kind of throws a spanner in the works, but that is talking about identity. That's how I would like to be known and remembered, that she was human, that she was sentient, that she was feeling, that she was all emotional, that she was able to receive and give and be remembered like that. And then for me, Muslim comes in. But I guess Muslim works hand in hand with being human, especially if you're a good Muslim and you're a good human. So,
oh, subhanAllah, I love that. Okay, mashallah. We'll circle back to that actually. Bilal, how about yourself? Which one would you say is your noun, so to speak, as opposed to your adjectives?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about my philosophical, logical head on. Where the philosophers would say you have like an essence or a substance, or substance, and then you have what they call accidents and different qualities that make up the person. So you have your central being, and everything else is just a quality. You might be tall or short or black or whatever, male, female, human being. So they actually go even further beyond human being. But I think being a human, yeah, definitely that's the first thing. Then we have qualities. Some of our qualities are fixed, and some of them are fluid, aren't they? So you could be Muslim today, tomorrow you're not necessarily Muslim, whereas others are fixed. Like, the colour of skin, that's something that, well, there are people who bleach their skin.
Or tan.
But, it's usually something that you can't change. And your chromosomal gender, you can't change that, even though you can change it outwardly. So some things are fixed and some things are fluid, aren't they?
Absolutely. These are all really good points. So I find this really interesting, because I always assumed, and I think, Exauce, you've disproven my theory. So this is really interesting for me. It's like, I always assumed that the quality that is most apparent would be the one that is the most basic to my identity. And obviously that's, when I'm out in public, that's Muslim, right? And female and et cetera, comes afterwards. But then other people who may not be immediately obviously Muslim, when they're outside, that sort of threw a spanner into my theory when Exauce, you said that your most basic one is Muslim. Because if you go outside, people don't automatically know that you're Muslim, right?
Exactly.
Being a
Unless I'm
man.
wearing a phobe.
Unless you're dressed the part, exactly. Whereas for a lot of Muslim women, if we wear hijab, we're dressing the part 24/7 if we're outside. So this is actually really, really interesting. Okay. So now, next question. Do you feel confident in identifying as a Muslim? And what does it mean to you? I'm going to start with Bilal, and then he has to ask the next question.
Yeah, of course. I'm a religious scholar, so I hope I feel confident in identifying as a Muslim. Definitely, I always have. Even when I first converted to Islam, that's never been a problem. I guess even the initial stages, I was a bit wary actually about telling people that I converted to Islam. So that very first transition, because you don't know how people are going to respond to that, or there are some anxieties related to that. But obviously, once if you've been in religion for several years, then confidence grows, doesn't it? What does it mean to me? It's being part of wider religious community, I guess. Obviously, there's a religious definition of who a Muslim is and who isn't a Muslim. But I guess for me, it's just about being part of that global ummah, that global community of Muslims worldwide.
Persephone, how about yourself? Do you feel confident identifying as a Muslim? And was it always the case?
I mean, for me, since taking my Shahada, so I think initially when I became Muslim, I was super duper confident, like nobody could question me. I would walk out of my headscarf thrown like proudly. People would greet me with salam. I would return the salam to them. And then, however, as I became more involved in my career, because I work as a producer in the media world, I started getting put into more circles, non-Muslim circles. And then I found myself kind of being seen as an advocate for Islam. And then I realized, actually, I don't have all the answers and I don't really know as much as I should know to respond to these sorts of questions that I'm getting asked. And then I found my confidence slightly chipping away. But actually, I think that was a good thing for me because it pushed me to learn even more about Islam. And then I found myself going into, because I live in Huddersfield and it's got a large Caribbean population, but the majority of the Caribbean people here are Christian. And I grew up with a Christian upbringing as well. My parents always want me to have faith in my life. So I would go to Sunday school, I would go to church. And then I found myself disassociating from that. But now when I go into for example, Pakistani areas within Huddersfield, because there's a large Pakistani population as well, I find myself, and I know we're going to go into this a little bit later on, but I do find myself sometimes having imposter syndrome, kind of thinking, okay, I don't look Pakistani, even though I am slightly Pakistani. I don't look like typical what people would expect a Muslim to look like. And I think when I speak to my non-Muslim friends and I ask them, what does a Muslim look like to you? They always describe somebody of Pakistani descent. And that kind of disheartens me. And I've noticed as well that sometimes I go into Pakistani areas and I'll greet them with salam, and that salam won't be returned because they think potentially that I'm maybe not Muslim, or maybe I'm mocking the religion. And then I have to repeat myself, Salamu alaikum, again and again and again. So that can really play with your confidence as well. But I've been through a whole kind of transition about what does it mean to be Muslim? How do we present ourselves as Muslim in the world? And I think the main thing that continues to push me in my confidence of being Muslim is my hijab, is making sure that I'm always wearing a scarf. No matter where I'm at with my journey with my hijab, it's important that I wear the scarf in one way or another to identify as Muslim, and also to know within myself that Muslims come in all shapes and sizes. And I've been quite grateful to travel the world as well quite a bit with my work. I've just got back from Panama 2 days ago, and I know that Muslims do look different all over the globe, and they do dress differently depending on the culture. They wear their scarves differently as well. They speak different languages. That experience in life has given me the confidence to identify as Muslim and to be proud of how I look and how I present as well. So yeah, I'm at a point now where I can say that I'm confidently Muslim and nobody can take that away from me.
Exauce, you're the most recent convert out of the lot of us. How do you feel?
David, the group.
Yeah.
I was quite the reverse, to be fair, because when I first converted to Islam, I wasn't confident at all. You know, I was quite shy. Like I wouldn't tell people that I'm a Muslim. I wouldn't try and show it. To be fair, I keep myself quite reserved. Even when it came to being surrounded by Muslims, I'll be quite reserved. And then when I started learning more about the religion and understanding more, then I became quite proud and more out. Like if I meet people, I'm like, yeah, I'm a Muslim, alhamdulillah, praise be to God, all that kind of stuff. I'll show them straight away. And I feel like it comes with when you understand why you became a Muslim to begin with, it's something to be proud of. When you learn the history, you learn what Islam is. Like coming from a life where you were in darkness to light, you're like, you want everyone to become a Muslim because you're like, look at the beauty that I found, look at the diamond that I found. And it comes up with like how you act. So like for me, that's why I said identity as a Muslim first, because when I do anything good, I'm basically representing Islam whenever I speak to someone, whenever I interact with someone. So I want to represent Islam in the best way possible, because you never know, they might look at it and be like, that's how I was. Like, because my friends were so warm and kind to me, it opened up my heart, even though I was so scared of Islam. So, but yeah, I kind of digressed a little bit. But yeah, I'd say now I'm more confident as a Muslim. Like I'll walk around in my thobe and stuff like that, and I wouldn't be shy about it. But when I first started being fragile, being new, not knowing what's going on, like when I went to the mosque for the first time, I went to a Pakistani mosque, and I did something wrong, and I had the uncle shout at me. I was like, I was scratching, I wanted to go home. And then the more you research about the religion, you understand like that's not how you're meant to be. Sometimes it is cultural. Some people, like in Africa, some people like they're quite harsh and brash, but it doesn't. Oh, by the way, just to explain what thobe is, it's basically it's like a long dress.
It's really common in the Arab world for men to wear that, isn't it?
So yeah, I realize like some people might be rude and stuff. It might be because of their culture. I don't associate with Islam, so I try to be. Yeah, I'd say I'm confident now. And like, what does it mean to me to be a Muslim? To be a Muslim is to show the character in everything that you do, whether your dealings or whatever it is, to show the character of a Muslim, which is being kind, being gentle, being nice, being well-minded, all those kind of things. That's for me. That's what it means to be a Muslim. And obviously worshiping God, Allah, in the right way.
It's just made me remember one time when I was feeling very much like I'm not Muslim. People don't receive me as Muslim. And I wanted to find a way through that. And I found myself going to the Sunnah, the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and looking at examples from his lifetime. And one of the most simple ways I found of identifying as Muslim and showing people that you're Muslim was smiling at other people. And for me, like now, whenever I go anywhere, the supermarket, the street, wherever, I just smile. And that reminds me, I am Muslim. I have a duty to smile at other people and to make them feel welcome.
100%. 100%. That's like something so that, like I said, like for me, a bit more information. Like I literally was like so scared of Muslims. Like I was like, you know, like I didn't want to be near any of them. Like, you know, I would turn my head away. Like I said, I'd walk across the other street, as bad as it sounds. And then when I went to college and I started meeting more friends who were Muslims and stuff, and they were the kindness that they showed me, the smile, taking me off of food, these little things, it opened my heart. So anything they were going to tell me, I would listen, compared to if they came in and they were quite brash. Anything they said, whether it was the truth or not, even if they brought evidence, I would have been close-hearted. So I definitely agree that smiling and being gentle, that is a major key, because it just opens up someone's heart, it just opens up a whole new dimension.
So how has your identity changed since taking the Shahada, converting to Islam, if it has changed at all?
My identity in terms of my personality has massively changed. Oh, this is what my parents say anyway. They said I was very bad-tempered, very intolerant of other people's opinions and choices. And now they find that I'm very patient, very disciplined, very grounded. And also I think that I have become somebody who appreciates the silent moments and the moments of downtime, the moments of free time. Somebody who has become more careful with my physical health as well. A little bit more about me. I had addiction to alcohol growing up, started drinking at the age of 12 and got myself into some very techie, very technical, very disappointing situations that led me to be very depressed and on a lot of medication and in hospital, in and out, and suicidal as well. But through Islam, my identity, I've become somebody that appreciates the smaller things in life, the the more mundane tasks in life as well now give me excitement. And I can definitely say that I am more at peace than I've ever felt before. So in terms of transformation and identity, the way that people receive me now, I'm no longer like a bull in a china shop.
I'd say for me, I wouldn't say my identity has completely changed as if like it's done a 360. If anything, becoming a Muslim has kind of beautified what I already had, if that makes sense. Not trying to sound like big-headed or self-centered or anything like that. Like previous to Islam, I was quite like, I've been brought up to be like, be nice, be polite, look out for people, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like after converting, it's only magnified even more. Like I put extra emphasis on it. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's changed me for the better than what I was. Therefore, but when I was a youngster, I didn't like drink or anything like that. It doesn't really appeal to me. But I seen the effects of it, which I'm really grateful because it steered me away from it. Because I had so many friends who were I was looking at it like thinking, wow, I'm so happy I'm not in that situation. It's made me wiser as well. I'd definitely say that, and it made me use my intellect more, question things, be critical.
I think all of us, Islam, definitely have improved our character and our moral conduct. So when we speak about identity, has any way that you identify yourself changed? So, for example, you spoke about wearing a different type of dress. So some people might now see you in that dress and externally they might identify you, as an Arab or a Muslim. I've been stopped in the Arab board and, they've asked me, are you Arabic from Sudan? Because when I speak Arabic, it's quite fluent as well. So, people have stopped me and said, oh, you from this country, you Kuwaiti or something. Has any of that changed? Maybe it hasn't changed at all.
Do you know what's mad? I'd say I'm quite the opposite because I haven't got a full beard like you, mashallah. So I think like even when I wear a faux, people can quite tell that I wasn't born Muslim. They can quite tell straight away. So I think but that's why I try to identify by my actions if I'm not wearing a faux, because it's quite hard to see how I'm a Muslim. If I was wearing my normal clothes and I'm walking down the street and someone walked past me, they wouldn't be like, oh, that's a Muslim right there. But when they start speaking to me and they see the way I act, they're like, oh, so what are you? Ooh. And then they see, oh, you're a Muslim. Wow. Okay, I didn't know they like that. And it might open up someone's heart. So that's what I try to do, because that's the experience that I had.
I find that really interesting though, because it just poses the question, do we not need to break down barriers of what does a Muslim look like? Because you said then that people don't identify you as Muslim because you haven't got a beard, but so what? Like you shouldn't really be going, well, as a community, as a population, and we're guilty of it in the Muslim community as well, we'll say, oh, that person's not Muslim because they haven't got the headscarf on, or because they haven't got the beard or the tobe or the abaya. But we shouldn't really be looking at people like that, because you don't know if somebody's Muslim, regardless of how they're dressed. You don't know where they're at in their journey, and you don't know the reason behind why they haven't got those elements to themselves, right? You kind of set yourself up to fail if you look at it that way, don't you? People's outward identity, as that's the thing that's like literally marks them as Muslim. But then again, maybe I'm slightly hypocritical or have a double standard in saying this, because I put my headscarf on mainly because I want to present myself as Muslim. And I remember going through my headscarf journey and really unpicking it and asking, why am I wearing this? Is it for me? Is it for Allah? Is it for my friends and family? Is it just as a way of identifying to the population that I'm Muslim? And that's what I kept coming back to as a starting point. Wear it for Allah, but wear it so people know you're Muslim as well. And I think in terms of identity, that's probably been the defining thing for me. When I first converted, came to Islam, I wore the niqab, and that was me really going full throttle. And my parents had concerns that I was going to be an extremist from wearing that, because I didn't ease them in and I didn't ease myself into the religion. But that's where I wanted to see myself. It was either all or nothing for me at that point, 10 years ago, subhanallah. But my friends now, my non-Muslim friends, my friends from childhood and my teenage years, they know clearly that I've had a massive change in my life, because they're so used to seeing me with my curly hair out, and that's what they knew me for in school, my hair. And now the fact that they can't see my hair, they're slightly startled, they're taken back, but they find it beautiful as well. Like when you sit down and you have a conversation with them, like I did throughout my documentary on BBC, it's called This Girl's Changed. I also spent a lot of time talking with friends and reconnecting with them and trying to find common ground and trying to explain to them where I'm at in life and why I wear the headscarf and why I want that to be my identity. And they just found it very humbling and they were very interested. And we underestimate the power of our gestures, our actions, our identity, and how it can inform other people's decisions. Because off the back of that, I've had 2 friends who want to take the Shahada.
I just wanted to jump in on something, a couple of things that Persephone has said about, wearing the hijab and it being a symbol of our Muslimness, which, some people might say, oh, well, you have to wear it purely for Allah's sake. But even Allah says in the Quran, when he tells women to cover, that's one of the reasons, so that they will be known, tell the believing women to cover so they'll be known. So obviously it's there. It's one of the reasons, subhanAllah. But I find it really interesting, obviously, because, I wear hijab as well. I present as a Muslim woman when I'm outside, but I've had some experiences where, not in the UK so much because everybody here knows me, I guess, but when I go home to visit my mum in my hometown in Canada, and I've been over at Muslim friends' houses, and of course, if it's just women in the house, we're not wearing our hijab, right? And other women will come over and not know what to do with me because what they see is white woman. And the immediate assumption isn't, oh, this is a Muslim sister. The immediate assumption is, why is this white woman in my friend's house? And I've been met with like hostility unless I give salams instantly. And then it's like, oh, you're one of us kind of thing. And I think maybe this is because they don't know me, obviously, because I don't live there usually. But I think it's also because like the community is very small there, it's very insular, and they're very sort of like protective of each other. And perhaps there's sort of, I think there's like this distrust of the wider community still in that community. So I found that really interesting to witness, especially because like that's my hometown, that's where I grew up, and it's where, I'm going back to that town, but with a very different identity than how it was when I was growing up there, like completely different, I would say. So I find that really interesting how, like, when we're outside, our identity is evident or can be evident more or less. But when we're inside our homes and somebody comes in from outside, maybe that's that signal, that label, that thing is gone. How do we manifest our identity then in front of those people?
That's really insightful because I've never experienced that. I've experienced the opposite, where I've took my scarf off and actually I've been more like an object of fascination because of my hair type, Yeah,
that would be, I can imagine that happening.
And then also going into like non-Muslim circles, when they see me with my scarf and then I'm surrounded by non-Muslim, they don't know what to do with me because I've got a scarf on. So it's the completely opposite experience of what you're feeling. And I think that's just a feeling in general about people. They flock to what they know, don't they? What they're familiar with. And any sign of something that's unfamiliar to them somehow threatens them in a way. It makes them feel uneasy. So just take it in its stride, enjoy it.
Absolutely. X, you were going to say something.
Man, I literally, similar to you, Amanda, I literally had the same experience in Turkey, right? So we was on the beach, and then I think it was time for Maghrib, which is the sunset prayer. So yeah, we was about to pray, and we wanted to put on the beach. And I was like, I don't want to put on the beach, not because I don't get sandy. So I was like, let's put like, you got like a beach bed, and you got like no plastic foamy thing. So they had that scattered. So we picked one up, and we like obviously found the Qibla, the direction towards Mecca, or towards the Kaaba, and then we put it down. And then we were standing around like talking who's going to lead. And then there was a guy who's it was his restaurant, and then the waiter came over, because I'm not gonna lie, we look like a bunch of hooligans, if that makes sense. Like I said, if you look at me, if I'm wearing chilled up clothes like joggers and a t-shirt, whatever, you wouldn't think he's a Muslim. And then so we're sitting there like talking like, oh, who's gonna lead, and the waiter is walking past, and he's like, I can tell he thinks we're hooligans. He comes past, picks up the little bedsheet that we made, picks it up, puts it back. I was thinking, oh, okay, we can't pray yet. Okay, no worries. I was like scratching my head. And then we like moved to a different direction. We was like, oh, do you know what? Let's just pray on the sand. So we started doing the Akama, which is the call to prayer, just literally as before the prayer's about to happen. And then the owner of the restaurant was like, he popped his head out and was like, wait, the Muslims. He's like, brother, come here, come pray in here. And that's just an experience of like, identity. Like, I don't look like a Muslim, so people don't assume that. They assume the opposite, the stereotype. Obviously, a black boy. I'm quite like big in it, so like they're like, oh, black boy. Do you know what I mean? And then when he started doing the Akama, started doing the call to prayer, immediately he's like, brother, come pray inside. He's like, here, please use this mat. And he's like, it was nice to see though, because I was like, wow.
It's nice when things like that happen, to have the positive reactions to it,
100%.
as opposed to the suspicion, which is
yeah.
Bilal, how about yourself? How has your identity changed since taking the Shahada, if you can remember, because it's been years, mashallah?
Yeah, it's been quite a while. So I have different identities now, obviously, because of studying and different circles that I'm involved with as well. So I'll put on different faces, or wear different hats, as depending on my situation. And obviously, I still keep in touch with my family who isn't Muslim as well. So, when I go to see them, I won't go as an imam or, a scholar.
Well, that's actually, you've sort of segued into the next question. Do you present different facets of your identity to different groups of people? I mean, you've just talked about that. Are you, with your family, you're one type, or you're one aspect? With your students, you're another aspect. With your own teachers, you're probably a different aspect.
Yeah, but ultimately it's the same person. So just the way we present ourselves in different environments. And I think we should do that. We should be aware of that as well, that we don't look too alien in, whatever environment we are at. So if I wouldn't go to the Friday, I deliver the Friday sermon in Manchester. I wouldn't turn up in a pair of shorts and t-shirt, to go and do that. Even though it would be fine, perfectly fine, in the religion of my nakedness is covered. But, people would, obviously, there'd be a lot of uproar if that happened.
I mean, that's a really interesting question that I've not paid much thought to before, but I think in essence, it's kind of like code switching, isn't it? When you go between different groups and you change your behavior or your attitude or what you present as. Do I do that? I think I do have an element of doing that, to be fair. Like, I think one thing that I've noticed is the Arabic language has become quite a part of my everyday use now and everyday vocabulary. And when I speak to my parents, when I go back home, that kind of falls by the wayside. You won't hear me saying, Inshallah, Alhamdulillah, that you'll hear me say in English, but I won't say it necessarily in Arabic. Then when I meet up with my girls, I'm using it as much as I can, But one thing I have noticed in myself this last year, as becoming more confident as a Muslim, is I've tried to collide the two worlds together, the non-Muslim world that I'm a part of and the Muslim world. And I think that just comes with experience and security within yourself and confidence. And even like little things like praying in front of family, that's something that I never used to do. But now I've made it my intention to have a prayer mat in their house and to tell them I'm going to pray. And I think I never used to do that because whenever I used to pray, I used to feel like my dad was going to shout, Persephone, what are you doing? Blah, blah. And then obviously I can't respond because I'm praying, and it would make me anxious and feel very insecure. But now I'm just putting my best foot forward. I'm just saying I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. Now I'm at a point where it's very important to remain authentic within myself. And I can't do that if I'm turning certain elements of myself off when I go into certain areas. I think the hardest struggle has been so far was this recent trip that I've just come back from in Panama, because I've been surrounded by nothing but Caucasian non-Muslim people who have a completely different value of life to me. It was a dating show, so very controversial, all about modern approach to dating, so polyamory and sexually fluid people. And that was the hardest point throughout me being Muslim, to remain Muslim. And I told all my girls, make dua that I keep my salah, make dua that I wear my headscarf, make dua that I keep doing tasbih, on the prayer beads, counting the beautiful names of Allah. And, I did, alhamdulillah, thanks and praise to Allah. But it wasn't easy. And as well, I know I spoke earlier about, I know that I mentioned that people know me as Malika, and they know me as Persephone as well. That is something that when I came to Islam, I thought, I've got to change my name. I've got to let everything go that I know. So I threw away my clothes, my Western clothes. You know, I stopped eating pork straight away. I stopped drinking alcohol straight away. Everything was out. Including my name, because I wanted to identify as Muslim, which meant I would take anything that would come towards me as Muslim or Islamically. But then I realized actually that Persephone is a name that suits me. Persephone is a name that my parents gave me. It's not a bad name. And actually, I don't have to change my name. So people know me as both Malika or Persephone. My Muslim friends will probably call me Malika, but some of them call me Persephone. It's just dependent on the mood because it doesn't take away from who I am.
I mean, when I converted, at that time, it was the done thing to change your name. And it was sort of like, okay, you've taken Shahada, what's your Muslim name? And I think in all honesty, that sort of shook my awareness of my identity more than anything else, because it was like suddenly I had to totally change. And it wasn't just changing my name. It was changing to a totally different language's name, if you get what I mean. And that was really like a shock to the system. And I remember it took me like months to even start answering to it. And I was at uni. So like sisters, I was involved in the ISOC in the Islamic Society and all of that. And I remember like sisters from the Islamic Society would be like calling my new name. And I'd be blanking them because I didn't recognize that as me. But they were so desperate to apply that label to me. And then subhanAllah, I think just like a few years ago, maybe about 8-10 years ago, I just suddenly thought, why am I doing this? This isn't me. Until now, I think at that point I'd been Muslim about 18 years. And it was like, this is still not me. So why am I bothering? Why am I trying to force the issue? And I just went back. Actually, it's kind of funny because the people who call me by that name now are so few. Like I don't really keep in touch with the people who would still call me by that name anyway. So it was like a massive shift when I decided to go back. Now, Exauce, you did not change your name, did you?
Nah, but I did kind of have the similar experience.
Okay.
So when I took my Shahada, and a couple of weeks later, I was in the car with my friend, was just driving, and he was like, so, what are you going to change your name to? I was like, what? What do you mean change my name? He was, yeah, do you want to change your name to something else? I was like, why do I have to change my name? Like, I asked him, like, because I was like, it was a shock to me, like, wait, what? I have to change my name? How am I going to tell that to my parents? I've been known as this name. What, my passport, am I going to have to change? What is going on? What have I got myself into? And he's like, oh, no, you don't have to change your name. Just people like to do it. I was like, okay, no worries. I'm going to stick to the name that I have. Because I feel like that's part of my identity. I've gone 17 years as Exauce. Why do I need to change it to something else? Especially, firstly, it'll break my mum. Like, do you know what I mean? Imagine trying to explain that to her. And I was like, if it's not going to impact me as a Muslim, why do I need to change it? Do you know what I mean? Not that I have anything against people who change their name. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think what you've brought up about it would hurt your mum. It would hurt your parents. I mean, when I had kids, I took ages naming them, right? There was so much thought that went into those kids' names, and I appreciate them. My parents did the same when I was born, obviously.
I think it's as well, I had a bit of fear of my mum, because if I'd have told her I changed my name, she'll put me in a headlock. She was like, what, you think you're a big man? Okay, say no more. We're going back. You're changing your name back, man. Yeah, so that little bit of a fear. I was like that.
I think as well, like just thinking about names in general, for me, when I not let go of, but when I became more comfortable in Persephone rather than Malika all the time, it was also because my full name is literally a Muslim name. So Persephone Ishma Rizvi. My surname is a Muslim name from my granddad, who's Pakistani. And my middle name is from my uncle Ishmael. So Ishma as well is a Muslim name. So I was like, people know me. Like they used to ask me when I was growing up, are you Muslim? And I'd say no. But now when they read my name or I write it on a form or anywhere, it's like that name in itself will say that I'm Muslim. Yeah. So I don't need Malika all the time.
I've written an article on New Beginnings website. It's called What's My Name? About this topic of changing names. So anybody who's listening, they can refer to that article.
I ask you whether or not you want to include it in the podcast. Why did you choose Bilal?
I chose Bilal because, first of all, it's easy to pronounce in English, and because of who Bilal was as well, from the companions, the freed slave of Abu Bakr, and his great status as well.
MashaAllah.
But I did ask my mum before I changed my name.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I sat with my mum and, chose it with her.
Why did you think it was important to involve your mum in your decision of choosing your name?
I think just by changing a name that she's given me and called me all her life.
Mm.
So I mentioned that in my article as well. So just to avoid that, really.
That's very caring of you, because I remember when I changed my name, my parents did not get consulted at all. I just changed it on Facebook and I was like, hey, I'm Alika. And that was it. Changed my Facebook completely. So that was, I think, just for converts or people thinking about coming to Islam, that's a really important step to try and involve friends and family in your decisions that could impact the rest of your life.
That's interesting because I didn't consult my parents, but I also didn't impose it on my parents when the topic of names came up, because I had a friend come over, and I was living with my parents at the time, and I had a friend come over and they called me this name, and my mom was like, "Who's that?" And I was like, "Oh, it's just a name that I use with my Muslim friends." And that's how I presented it. I presented it as, it's just not that big of a deal. I've never said to them, "You need to call me this. This is who I am now," because I didn't think of it like that. I think I really just thought of it as something that other people will call me, which is probably why it never actually took root, because that was my attitude towards it. So let's move along. I want to know, have we ever suffered from identity crises, whether before we took the Shahada or after? Because I think identity crises are not limited to converts. And how did you address it, if you ever did?
What do you mean by identity crisis?
Have you ever had a moment or a period of time where you weren't sure who you are, where you sort of were thinking, who is Exauce? You yourself weren't sure.
I wouldn't say for me per se, I wouldn't say I had an identity crisis, but other people thought that because so I went from having all my friends being non-Muslims to having a small group of Muslim friends. And whenever I go back to my non-Muslim friends, they'll be like, "Why are you a Muslim for? It's a Saudi thing. You're trying to be something that you're not, thinking that this religion is based upon where you're from, etc." Which I had the same idea when I didn't know anything. So I think other people might have seen as an identity crisis, especially when I was doing things that they didn't like. For example, they want to go out, I don't know, go drinking or something. I'm like, "Nah, I'm all right, thanks." They're like, "Oh, but why are you? This is not you. Be you." Do you know what I mean? But I think for me per se, I wouldn't say I've had an identity crisis. I always identify myself as a Muslim. Nah, I wouldn't say me per se, but other people would they would see as an identity crisis due to their lack of knowledge and seeing me dressing up with a phobe and be like, "Why are you wearing that for?" All that kind of stuff.
I feel like I'm the problem child here. I have had so many identity crises in my lifetime. And I don't know if it's a result of being mixed race or just being me and my mind. I don't know. But what I do know is that I have definitely felt a disconnect with myself at several stages. And if we look at it from an ethnicity point of view, I think it's very hard growing up in Britain, knowing that you're Mediterranean, but then also Caribbean, but then also Asian, and not really knowing which one of them and how to relate to them in the best way and how to express that identity, that ethnicity, because I didn't grow up with my parents telling me that I'm mixed race. I grew up with my parents telling me I'm British. My parents are very proudly British. And that introduced a whole different set of values and outlook into my life. And only as I've got older, and I said this earlier on, but as I've got older and I've started to connect with my culture and my ethnicities by going to Jamaica, going to Malta every single year, that has taught me a new identity, a new thing about myself, a lot of new things about myself. And actually, recently, before I actually went on my work trip abroad, I wanted to get in touch with my Pakistani granddad, who I've never met before, because I felt like I eat the food all the time. I'm absolutely in love with Pakistani cuisine. So I now need to delve into the culture just to get to know who am I and who are my ancestors a little bit more. So that's something that's on the horizon, meeting up with him and just learning about his view on Islam, because he's Muslim, and his view on Pakistani culture and how that intertwines with being Muslim as well in Britain. And that for me is I feel like that is the final piece of my ethnicity puzzle that I really want to get to know. And then just in terms of being a Muslim, I've definitely had several identity crises, whether it's to do with how I wear my headscarf or what circles I put myself into or what environments I put myself into. It's made me question, am I a good enough Muslim? Am I actually being Muslim? And I think that those uncomfortable feelings are actually very positive, because nothing grows in the comfort zone, basically. And I'm a strong believer of that. I've always considered myself ambitious and an overachiever. I'm a bit of a perfectionist as well. In terms of identifying as a Muslim, it's really important to know that feeling like an imposter or feeling like you're unsure of who you are is a good sign, and it just shows that you want to progress and be better and be a better version of yourself. And that's all we can ask for as Muslims to want to improve ourselves and to see that as a jihad, a struggle, an everyday small struggle, and make our way through that.
Do you know what? I think that helps with identity crisis, because I feel like once you know the basis of Islam, like you know that Islam's not based on your ethnicity, it's not based on where you were raised, knowing that, you know, that you can still be within your culture as long as it doesn't go against the tenets of Islam. Once you know that, I feel like that helps you not be in an identity crisis, because I feel like that's what helped me. Because I think that if I didn't start learning like the basics of what Islam is and what the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us, I think I would have probably had where I would be like, am I Arab today? Am I Pakistani tomorrow? Okay, I'll try and like squeeze into like different sectors. But I feel like knowing what Islam is, I think that helps massively, because you know, like, okay, I can still be British and still be a Muslim. I can still be African and be a Muslim. I can still be whatever.
I'm finding all of this really fascinating. And Persephone, I think you were saying that you think you're the naughty child, the one who has a lot of identity crises. I had so many before I even found Islam. And I think it's because, like, I mean, I grew up in Western Canada, middle class white girl, you know, literally the default setting of society. I didn't even think about identity growing up. Like, it was never anything I had to think about because I just was. And then I went to live in the Far East, and suddenly I was not society's default setting. I was very, very different, and people were staring at me and people were pointing at me. And it suddenly made me think, wait a minute, who am I? I'm out of my comfort zone. And I really love what you said about nothing grows in the comfort zone. That's so true. I was so out of my comfort zone, and I was suddenly having to think, you know, okay, so who is Amanda then? What does it mean? Like, if somebody were to ask me, who are you? I had no idea. And that's what sort of set me on the path of trying to figure that out, that eventually led me to quizzing Muslim people about who they were and finding Islam through that, subhanAllah. But then post-Shahada, definitely identity crises. And again, I think it's because I took Shahada in the UK. Well, officially, I took Shahada in the UK, but still, societally, I was the norm, as it were. And the majority, as it were. And so the Muslim community then was trying to impose Muslim identities on me, but cultural ones, right? You know, there's this idea that white people don't have culture and white people don't have an ethnicity. And it's sort of like you're this blank slate and we can apply anything to you. So it was like this idea that, okay, well, here's a young white girl who's become Muslim. Whoever she marries, that's going to be her identity. So because I got married then to an Arab person, I had to sort of adopt that as an identity. You know, that culture, that way of thinking, that way of life, and so on. And oh my days, I tried so hard and I was so bad at it. So because, you know, I'm not, and I do have a very strong identity and culture and background. You know, it was just growing up, I didn't realize it because everybody else was like me. And I think that this issue of identity really comes to the front when your identity is different from the other people around you. That's what sort of triggers us to think about it and to sort of crystallize it in a way. And I've always been really impressed by my friends who have grown up having the blessing of being other, the blessing of being different, the blessing of, you know, not necessarily fitting in, because, yeah, there's difficulties with that, I admit, and I'm grateful that I didn't have to grow up with the difficulties of that. But it also makes people very sure of who they are, which I didn't have that growing up. And I think that's what made me have all of these multiple crises of identity, you know, both before and after I took the Shahada, which, you know, now at this age, I'm finally sort of starting to sort through and starting to realize, okay, this is who Amanda is. And I think people are sort of surprised to hear that, because I can come across as very confident and very sure of myself. But, you know, internally, I'm still figuring out who I am. It's still very much, you know, a work in progress, which I think, you know, the next question on our list is, you know, if you've had a crisis, how did you address it? Having conversations like this, you know, has really helped me to address it, talking to other people and hearing their other experiences and so on. It's really interesting, you know, and comparing to other people's experiences as well.
In my family, you know, that strong identity and strong culture, as we're from the West Indies, so it's really embedded in you from a very young age. Like, this is our culture, and, you know, this is where we're from. And so I don't think, because we have such a strong identity, and living as a minority as well in the UK, you know, always having to stand up for yourself and know who you are and where you're coming from. And it was very important in our family.
I find it really interesting, Amanda, your story then, like a little bit more about you and like how you identify and like the transition that you've been through. I guess I wanted to ask you, because you are, unlike me, Bilal, Exia, like you're the majority in England, right? But then you put a headscarf on and then somehow you become a minority again.
Yeah.
So how do people receive you? How do Caucasian people receive you? Non-Muslim Caucasian people?
Oh, yeah.
Do they ask you questions like, you know, like, was this forced? Like, who's your husband? Are you married now? Did you convert for him? Like, does that all come in for you?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's always this assumption that anybody takes the Shahada, it's because there's a man, because they want to get married, or they have to get married, or because they're already in a relationship. And yeah, that happens for some people, but it wasn't with me that way. People always assume that. People assume, the one that I got the other day, actually from a colleague, because like I work for a mainstream organization. By mainstream, I mean like a non-Muslim organization. And one of my colleagues actually said to me, you know, I was sort of explaining something about the Muslim community. And my colleague actually said to me, you know, oh, well, moderate Muslims like you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, hang on, like, what does that mean? What is a moderate Muslim? And she was like, well, you know, you're not like a fundamentalist. And I was like, okay, I don't like these labels anyway, but what does that mean? And I was trying to draw it out of her. And she was like, you know, oh, well, you're very open-minded. You're this, you know, you're not such a strict Muslim. And I said, no, you know what? I am actually quite strict. Like, I would never call myself moderate by any, like, to me, because to me, moderate means sort of like, again, I don't like these labels, but moderate to me means people who are sort of lax, easygoing with religious rules kind of thing. You know, and I think another term that gets used is progressive, which is another term that I hate because I don't even know what it's meant to mean. But here she was sort of trying to label me as moderate and progressive. And I was like, no, like I reject that label. And she couldn't understand that because I'm an easygoing, open-minded, non-bigoted person, that, you know, she automatically assumed that those qualities in me meant that I wasn't really all that Muslim. And I was like, wow, like, do you not see how I'm dressed? Do you not see when we meet up, I will like excuse myself and go and pray? Like, that's pretty fundamental. But, you know, she couldn't see, she just assumed. And I thought that that's, you know, wow, we got a lot of work to do was with immediately what I thought with that, because I thought is she thinks that Islam is harsh. She thinks that Islam means a person will be a difficult person to deal with. And I thought, you know, we've got so much work to do, but why is it's all on me to kind of do it? And I think she felt comfortable saying that to me and having that conversation with me because she's white and I'm white. And so she felt that connection too. It's a huge responsibility though. I'm not sure it's one that I really want, but you know, it's one that we're saddled with, I think.
Going off that point, I think the biggest reason why people think like that is because they can't identify between culture and Islam. They just mix it all together. Like I know some people, like some ethnicities are known to be harsher, and people from the outside look at it and think, okay, that's what Islam is, and it just muddle all together. So I think that's like one of probably the biggest problems that people, because I was like that as well. So I kind of get where they're coming from.
A lot of converts we speak to, and I mentioned this earlier, a lot of converts that we speak to, they mention this issue of imposter syndrome. So throwing this out to everybody, whoever wants to answer it, have you ever felt a sense of having imposter syndrome? Why do you think it happened? If you have had it, why do you think it happened? And if you have never had it, why would it happen?
Just to add to that as well, Amanda, do you think that sometimes converts to Islam, they try too hard because there is this idea of imposter syndrome?
Okay, that's an interesting addition to that. What do you guys think?
I think that imposter syndrome can happen for that reason, but I also think that just at the most basic level, imposter syndrome happens because you feel like you don't match up to other people's expectations as well as your own. And in terms of tackling that, for me, I'm not trying to meet up to anybody else's expectation. The problem comes in when I don't meet up to my own expectation of myself. And that can be a really unsettling feeling, but like I said earlier, it's a very comforting feeling to know that you're pushing yourself to be a better version. And the best way of tackling that is just acknowledging that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. What you're feeling is exactly what you're supposed to feel. And now you need to crack on and doing things that meet and resonate with your core values. So if you're somebody that says to everybody, oh, I'm a fitness fanatic, but you know you've not exercised in a week, you're going to feel like an imposter, right? Like that's been me for the last 5-6 weeks of my life. Like I've done zero exercise, but then I tell everybody, yeah, I exercise 3-4 times a week. But it's not about the progress for me. It's about the outcome. And that's also a problem of imposter syndrome. We attach ourselves to the outcome rather than the progress, because the progress is mundane, the progress is boring, the progress is tedious, but actually the beauty is in the progress. So if you can start to look at your life and frame your life as, okay, I might not be where I'm supposed to be. So people might consider me an imposter and I might consider myself as an imposter, but actually I'm on my way to becoming that. Therefore, that feeling is going to go and I'm no longer going to be imposter because I'm going to own it. And that's the best way. Just keep taking a step by step and work towards it.
It's tough because when you come into Islam as a convert or a revert, you're like lost. You're hot. You're looking at someone to grab onto, someone to like lead you down the journey. And a lot of Muslims, what they think is, okay, we're going to lead them down our journey and he's to become one of us, which kind of confuses the person who's accepted it. Because they're like, for example, when I converted, I eat everything. I mean any kind of food. I'm not picky. And then when I converted, I'm like, everyone's like, oh, you need to eat biryani, forget about this, forget about. I'm like, wait, what? I was so confused. Like, but I still like the food that I used to have. Why can't I still have it? And they're like, oh no, as a Muslim, you need to have. Come on, man. So, and someone who doesn't look like, who don't feel not confident, but like they're still looking around, they're still like trying to click onto something. They'll like be like, okay, no worries, I'm gonna leave that past behind and then jump into this new role that doesn't suit them. Do you know what I mean? So you're just at a confused state and you're grabbing onto anyone that will take you basically. And I feel like coming back to like what I said before, I feel like once you understand what Islam is, what Islam teaches about how to live your life, it kind of helps you to stop that imposter syndrome. So if someone does come to you and be like, blah, 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 you should be like this. Like, no. What I do currently doesn't go against Islam and I don't need to change in that aspect.
I think what you said about having knowledge really helps, even just basic knowledge, but it really helps to overcome that, because when you're new and you don't necessarily know what is Islam and what is culture, and people will tell you things and it gets very confusing. Then you sort of find yourself swimming, as it were, like drowning in a way. I think for me, the biggest, and this is until now, I always feel like a sense of impending imposter syndrome when Ramadan comes around, because it's like, it's my struggle. Ramadan is my struggle. It's the one thing, like praying, I didn't have a problem learning how to pray or starting to pray 5 times a day. The rest of it, absolutely no problems. But fasting is like such a thorn in my side, subhanAllah. It's like the thing that I know I have to do it, and I would much rather not do it. And then you go on social media, or even before social media, everybody was like excited for Ramadan. And I could not understand why. Why are you all excited for Ramadan? It's like, you're going to starve. And bearing in mind, when I became Muslim, Ramadan was December. Like I had no idea what was on the horizon. Right? In August, July, June, and all of that. That for me was when I started to really feel like, am I even doing this right? Because everybody else is excited for this and I am dreading it. And I do this even now. And I think even now I've realized that like in my early journey within Islam, I had a lot of trauma associated with Ramadan, and working through that now, it's like now I'm starting to realize that, okay, all of that has colored my experience. But until now, whenever Ramadan starts approaching, I start thinking a real Muslim would be looking forward to Ramadan. Why am I not looking forward to Ramadan? And it was only like maybe a couple of years ago that one of my best friends and I, we were sitting and having a conversation, and I admitted this for the first time to her. And she just went, oh, thank God somebody else feels like I do. And I was like, really? And then we realized that like there were other sisters feeling like this. And a lot of it was about the pressure to perform in Ramadan and the social media toxicity around Ramadan and all of that.
I think 95% of Muslims, if they were really honest, they would say we're not really looking forward to Ramadan and, you know, fasting for such long hours, especially, you know, in the summertime as well. But, you know, we've got this social media environment where everyone's posting all of these things, reading the Quran and finishing the Quran and doing all the prayers and giving all the charity and fasting and, you know, the hype. I don't think that most people are doing all of those things that they post.
Yeah, I think I would agree with what Bilal said, that there's more of us than we let on that are dreading it. But I also feel like I recognize also in myself, the imposter syndrome is in the run-up. But after the first few days, I realize what it's all about. And, you get into the groove of it, you get into your rhythm, and you feel the blessing of it, right? But like in general with imposter syndrome, do you guys think that there's anything that new Muslims can be aware of? Is there any advice that you would give on preventing or overcoming imposter syndrome?
I think my advice would be just be aware of your own development. Like, don't compare yourself to others. Become aware of your own kind of journey and know that it will take time. Know that you might have more questions than answers, and don't be discouraged if you feel like you're falling behind what your goals are. Like, you might have a goal to read Quran during the month of Ramadan, or just in general. Like, don't think because you've fallen behind a page that now you can't pick it up and continue, or now that you're not good enough to read the Quran. Just keep going. And also be vulnerable, like lean towards your friends and your family and let them know that you're feeling disconnect. If you are feeling that disconnect with your religion, with your iman, like just let them in, because the more you let people in, the more that they understand you and can offer you support as well.
I think my advice would be just to be confident, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah exalted is, He has chosen you to become Muslim, that is something huge. That's massive. You might remind yourself why you came to Islam, and just think about how Allah has chosen you to become Muslim. And you're never going to be perfect, no matter how hard you try.
Another thing as well is to know why you became a Muslim. Why? To ground your belief, because a lot of converts accept Islam and they jump straight into like the craziest things, like trying to read hadiths, like the sayings and the actions of the Prophet, or trying to understand this and all that. Before you do that, slow yourself down. Establish the foundations. You don't build a house by starting with the roof. You build it by starting with the below, the flooring, and then you build up. And if you do fall, you got the foundations to save you. And the foundations are so important and so beautiful that even if you do fall, you go back and like, okay, this is what I'm Muslim. Like everyone else mentioned, take your time. Everybody's on a different journey. Some people, they come into Islam and from minute one, they smash it. And like you look at them 2 years later, they're completely a different person. Other people, it's taken 10 years to get to a certain level. It doesn't matter. It's not about who finishes first. It's about being consistent.
Thank you both so much for coming and for, giving us your time and your presence today. It's been really valuable and insightful, and I hope that our listeners will benefit from it as much as I have personally.
Definitely been very, very insightful, and a lot of perspectives that I never heard before. So if you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to learn more about the issues we've discussed today, please drop us an email at unplugged@beginnings.org.uk. That's unplugged@beginnings.org.uk.
Excellent. Jazakallah khair, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on. May Allah reward you. Inshallah, God willing, we'll see you all soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
assalam.
That's it for another episode of the New Beginnings podcast. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share on social media and with family and friends.
Yes, please do share and subscribe. We're on all major podcast platforms. Inshallah, we'll see you next time.
I look forward to it, but for now, thank you for listening.
Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.